The Enterprise is called in when a bunch of miners on a mining colony, very important to the Federation, start getting whacked, apparently by being burned to a crisp. Not something you tend to think of as a hazard of mining, but it stopped mining production completely, and Kirk, Spock, and the crew need to get to the bottom of this. But something unexpected happens when our boys come face to face with the devil in the dark. Hit it!
Hey!
3 major guest stars this week. First, playing Janus 6's mining foreman Chief Vandenberg is Ken Lynch. He did guest spots on all the usual suspects, Mannix, Gunsmoke, a few episodes of Gomer Pyle, Andy Griffith, and The Virginian, but also appeared in some high-profile films like North by Northwest and Anatomy of a Murder. He also showed up in both Battlestar Galactica and, unfortunately, Galactica 1980, as a guy named Grover. You win some. Moving on. Next up, playing miner Ed Appel, we got Brad Weston. Same smattering of guest spots in all the cop and cowboy shows at the time, including 8 episodes each of Have Gun Will Travel and 77 Sunset Strip. His final credit being Hippie at Party in 1991's The Doors. And finally, playing his first of 2 roles on Star Trek, appearing as Security Chief Commander Giotto, we got you Barry Russo. Now, this guy has cop and or cowboy written all over him, and he was thus everywhere for a while there. But his biggest television role was in more of a soap opera kind of thing, playing Roy Gilroy in The Young Marrieds, whatever the hell that is. The headliners in that thing you probably wouldn't recognize, but it did have recurring roles played by folks like Lee Merriweather, Ted Knight, and it was one of Charles Grodin's early gigs. Our boy Barry here is something of an oddball, considering over his acting career, he went by such stage names as Barry Russo, John Duke, Harry Russo, J. Duke Russo, John Russo, and John Duke Russo. Sounds like he was screwing with people, trying to make sure no one who even kinda sounds like him is able to register their name with AFTRA. Weird. But enough about that. Let's get into the plot. We open someplace other than the Enterprise. We're in a cave that's part of some kind of huge operation. There are a bunch of guys in orange jumpsuits and one guy in a yellow jumpsuit who seems to be in charge. Maybe rank is based on the rainbow, like that role-playing game Paranoia or something. Lots of expositive lines here, but here's the key bullet points. There's a monster. It's killed more than 50 people. A guy tried to phaser it and got whacked. The Enterprise has been alerted to the situation and it's on its way. And one poor schmuck is left on his own as a guard against this thing, and his name is Schmitter, because presumably that's where his chances of making it through the cold open are, the Schmitter. The other guys don't even make it a couple of dozen feet before Schmitter's screams make him come a-running. And when they get there, Chief Yellowpants takes one look and says, just like the rest of them, Schmitter's been burned to a crisp. After the opening credits, a captain's log gets us up to speed. This is all happening at a Pergeum mining operation on Janus 6. The big 3 beam down and meet with Chief Yellowpants, whom we learn is actually named Vandenberg. He explains that about 3 months ago, they dug into a new level that had a bunch of Pergeum, whatever the hell that is, as well as all kinds of other stuff like uranium, platinum, nougat, stuff like that. But things started to go wrong. First, it was just machinery, but when they sent a guy down there to fix it, he got burnt to a crisp by something. And he wasn't the last. People were just getting killed way down in the new place, but people are turning up charbroiled closer and closer to the top, where they got their offices and Rainbow Coverall Factory and all that stuff. Schmitter got flash fried just 3 levels down. And McCoy wants to see the Schmitter fritter, so an orange guy comes in and takes him to check him out. Kirk wants to know if anyone has actually seen this thing, and a purple guy happens to be walking by, and he says he's seen it. He's Ed Appel, apparently, and when Kirk asks him to describe it, he says he can't. He only got a glimpse of it. Then he describes it. Big, shaggy. He apparently shot it, but it didn't do nothing. While Ed is being an unnecessary jerk all of a sudden, talking about how Starfleet ain't gonna be no help, Spock has picked up a shiny ball thing from Vandenberg's desk and wants to know what it is. Vandenberg says it's a silicon nodule and that there are millions of them down in the tunnels. Then he starts getting mouthy too, going, "Shut up about my silicon ball and go kill the Shaggy Dude Roaster." Well, the Schmuck brothers take off and McCoy comes in and says that Schmidt didn't burn to death. It was more like he got dissolved by a super acid, something that could not only do the Breaking Bad thing on dudes, but eat through machinery, metal, rock, whatever you got. Spock has figured out on the map where the incidents of sabotage and death happened and said the creature would have had to have hauled ass to do all that stuff in the times that they say it did. But they can't tell how many creatures there are or if there are any at all because the sensors don't register anything but the minors. Spock says we're going to have to force it to show up somehow. Well, the thing can eat through iron, but it don't eat through irony because we cut to a giant door marked power reactor and an orange jumpsuit apparently guarding it. We hear a scrapey sound and Orange Boy pulls out his hand phaser to go check it out, and then we get a POV shot of his screaming and something jumping on top of him. Jump cut to a smoking outline of a dude, and we dolly over to see that a big hole has been burned through the reactor door. When Kirk, Spock, and Vandenberg investigate, they find that the reactor has burned into and the circulating pump has been stolen. We also find out that neither the mining people nor the Enterprise has a replacement pump. The thing's really old and clearly not that important, so why have replacement parts, you know? I mean, now that it's gone, we're all gonna die, but how were we supposed to know that might happen? Kirk calls up to Scotty and asks if he can rig up a replacement for the pump, and Scotty says he can do that, but it ain't gonna last but about 2 days if they're lucky. Kirk says, get started. The lives of everyone depends on it. Now, time for a coffee break. Spock points out that the pump was not taken by accident. It is the linchpin for the reactor and the whole human operation. Kirk wonders why this is happening all of a sudden when the facility has been here for years. Spock walks over to that silicon ball and postulates that life as they know it is based on carbon. But what if life could also be based on silicon? McCoy ain't buying it. Kirk said, though, that he's read in Alien Monster Weekly or something that silicon-based life is possible and might be different enough that the phasers don't affect it. Spock says at least the low-powered phaser 1s they got here, but the phaser 2 pistols might have a greater effect. McCoy still thinks they're out of their minds with the silicon thing, but Kirk tells Spock to get Commander Giotto, whoever the hell that is, to assemble a security team, make sure they're armed with phaser 2s, and adjust them to work better on silicon. Spock is still pondering the silicon ball, though. He says that Vandenberg talked about how there were thousands of these things in that new chamber they just opened up, and that was right when people started getting deep fried. Kirk says, yeah, what about it? Spock is like, oh, nothing. Cut to Scotty setting up a meth lab in the reactor room. Kirk asks how it's going, and Scotty says it'll work, but not for long. Spock calls Kirk to let him know the red shirts are ready to get their pep talk and their last rites and whatnot and get to work. So we cut to 6 red shirts led by Commander Giotto, who is drawing really good circles on a notepad, and including Lieutenant Leslie, who is probably perturbed that he's pulling monster bait duty since he's a bridge officer. Never trust recruitment officers, kids. Kirk tells them we don't know what you're looking for, but when you see it, shoot to kill, shoot to kill, shoot to kill. Spock asks Vandenberg what level they found the silicon balls on. It's level 23, so Kirk tells them to start looking there. And off they go. Giotto leads 2 red shirts, including Leslie, through the tunnels, and elsewhere we see Kirk and Spock doing the same. Spock whips out the tricorder and seems to be picking something up, so they go and check it out. Cut to Ensign Heinrich von Roteshemd over here, off by himself like a schlemiel, and it's only seconds before we get the POV shot of doom, and it's time to increment the counter. Kirk and Spock hear the scream and come a-running. Spock checks the ash pile's phaser and notices that it hasn't been fired. Thing must have got him quick. Spock looks around and finds a perfectly tubular tunnel that he says reads as though it was just made. Right when they're talking about how they wouldn't be able to make a tunnel that big that fast, enter the monster. They turn around and see what looks like a giant meatball in some marinara sauce. They shoot it with their phasers, and it runs off down one of those tube tunnels. Giotto and his boys show up, must have heard the shooting, and ask if everything's all right. All is well, and they check out the chunk of the monster they just blew off a second ago. Spock says it seems like fibrous asbestos, pliable but still mineral. It's also still pulsating, which is kind of gross. Spock says this confirms that the creature is silicon-based and can move through rock like people move through air. Kirk tells Giotto to get his boys in this area since that's where the thing obviously is, and they head out. Spock gets done with a scan and says that he's scanned for 100 miles in every direction and can only find one of these creatures. There's too many tunnels for one of these things to have made in a lifetime, so either there's more than one and Spock can't read the rest of them for some reason, this one is super duper long-lived, or, as Spock points out, there used to be more, but now they're dealing with the last of its kind. And if that's the case, he says, if it's the last of its kind, then they can't kill it. It would be a crime against science.
It's killing the captain! Shoot, quick!
I won't shoot Nancy.
This is not Nancy. If she were Nancy, could she take the...
Yeah, whatever. Kirk says, sorry, we're gonna grease this thing. Cut to another tunnel, and like some kind of red shirt hydra, despite one of the red shirts getting cremated before, 3 have apparently taken his place, and now we got 8. Spock has given them little maps, and he tells them what they need to do to surround the thing. Giotto is excited at the thought of putting his people in a perfect circle around the creature. Spock makes one more attempt to do the let's capture it instead of kill it thing, but Kirk ain't having it. He says shoot it, blow it up, make fun of it when you're doing it too, get mean about it, go. The red shirts head out and Kirk tries to get Spock to go help Scotty with the pump, not wanting to risk them both. But Spock slings some odds on them both getting killed being pretty tiny, so Kirk relents. Scotty calls and tells Kirk that his meth lab has failed and the reactor's gonna blow in 10 hours. Ticking clock, you're needed on set. Kirk calls Vandenberg and tells him that the miners are going to have to evacuate because the reactor's going to blow up. Vandenberg says the creature has killed too many of his guys and they all want to stay and help. Kirk says we don't have phasers for everybody, and Vandenberg says that's okay, they'll use clubs. Kirk is like, yeah, that makes sense. Have at it. As he's hanging up, Spock notices that they're being watched. He gets some fresh readings down a couple of tunnels, and Kirk and Spock split up and take a tunnel each. They creeps down their respective tunnels until Kirk gets to a chamber with a lot of them silicon balls in it. He calls Spock, and when he tells Spock about them, Spock says don't screw with them. As Kirk is asking why not, the creature knocks over a rock column and causes a cave-in around the captain. Spock freaks out and starts running that way, but Kirk says he's fine. Spock thinks this is suspicious timing and that he's coming to help the captain. As Kirk is saying, oh, fine, our meatball burns through the wall and says, hey! When we come back from a commercial break, Kirk is in a standoff with the meatball. When Kirk lowers his phaser, the meatball starts coming. When he aims it at the meatball again, the meatball backs off. Spock calls and Kirk tells him he's looking right at the meatball. Spock wants Kirk to smoke the thing, saying he can't take the risk, but Kirk says it don't seem to be making any threatening moves, at least while he's got the phaser pointed at it. Spock says he's on his way. In the meantime, Kirk decides to talk to the meatball. The meatball responds by showing Kirk where he and Spock phasered off a piece a while ago. Looks like it ain't just that the meatball is smaller, that's a genuine wound right there. This thing is hurt. Just then, Spock shows up, and Kirk stops Mr. Let's Try to Capture It from going all Laser Floyd all over the last remaining meatball monster in the universe. Spock sees that Kirk is right. It's just kind of sitting there waiting to see what these weirdos do. Spock points out to Kirk there are tons of those silicon balls around, and Kirk asks what Spock thinks they mean. Yet again, Spock is like, yeah, I'll tell you later. Then he suggests trying to mind meld with the meatball. Kirk says, that's really weird, but yeah, sure, give it a shot. Spock makes the connection and immediately screams in pain and almost falls out. As he shakes it off, he's explaining to the captain that the meatball is in excruciating pain. And just then, the meatball burns the words "No Kill I" in the rock, and while it's only text, you can sense the Shatnerian pauses between the words. Kirk and Spock can't decide if the meatball is saying it don't want them to kill it, or that the meatball ain't going to kill them. Spock says it must have learned how to spell when it did the mind meld. Not so much on the grammar, though, apparently. Spock has learned some stuff too. It's really intelligent, it's hurting like a bastard because somebody shot off a hunk of its ass, but it ain't gonna get stupid about that. And also, it's called a hoarder. Personally, I like meatball better, but it says it's a hoarder, so it's a hoarder. They try to figure out how they're going to ask the hoarder for the pump thing, and Spock says they don't have any reason to give it back. We got nothing to barter with here. Kirk thinks about it and then gets on the horn to McCoy and tells him to come here. Maybe we can trade some health care for the thing. Spock is like, I don't think McCoy is up on his hoarder doctrine, and Kirk is like, I know, I just want to screw with him. In the meantime, meld up with it again and see why it's killing people all of a sudden. This time, Spock hunkers down and gets handsy with the hoarder, but the hoarder don't seem as freaked out by it this time. While he's getting started, Kirk checks in with Giotto, who tells him that they're all holding outside the tunnel that he and Spock are in. And Vandenberg and his boys are wanting to know what's going on down there, and they're getting a little mob justicey for Giotto's liking. Kirk says keep them out, but when Bones gets there, let him in. Giotto's like, bet. As he hangs up, Spock is getting connected. He says stuff like, murderers, devils, eternity ends, the chamber of the ages, stop them, strike back, and so forth. Kirk asks about the pump, and Spock relays the message. There's a certain, why not, everything's screwed anyway, to the answer, but the hoarder tells Kirk where the pump is. Says it's in the chamber of the ages, out the door, past the Schmitter, second chamber on the left. Then Spock goes back to talking about sorrow, crying for the murdered children, that kind of thing. Kirk gets to the Chamber of the Ages and sees a ton of those silicon balls, but a whole buttload of them have been smashed open. Meanwhile, McCoy has showed up, and he's pondering his weird-ass patient and has got an idea. He calls up to the ship and tells them to send something down. We don't hear what it is, but with how the guy on the other end of the phone seems to be acting, it's something weird. Spock is still communicating some serious doom and gloom from the hoarder, and Kirk returns with the pump and one of the smashed balls. He gets Spock to break off the mind meld and tells him that he's figured out that they're eggs. Stunning detective work, Batman. The audience figured that out about a half hour ago. Where you been? Anyways, he says that the miner's operation must have destroyed thousands of the hoarder eggs, and they had no idea. Cut to Giotto holding back those miners, and one of them pulls the look over there trick, and they clock all of the red shirts in the head and start down the tunnel. Back where the hoarder is, McCoy's got his hands covered in some kind of mud and is slathering some on the hoarder. The miners show up all pissed off, but Kirk says he's gonna smoke anybody that tries to hurt the hoarder. Vandenberg says he'd kill 50 of his guys. Should be 52, but Schmitter and the reactor guy don't get no respect, apparently. I'm letting him off the hook for not counting the red shirt since that wasn't one of his guys. Anyways, Kirk says, well, you've killed thousands of her children, so what do you think about that? Yeah, them bulls, they're eggs. Spock explains that every 50,000 years, the hoarder lay eggs. Then all of them die but one, and that one takes care of the eggs and the hoarder kids when they hatch. Kirk says she didn't have a problem with sharing the planet with the humans until they started smashing her eggs. That's when she went all John Wick, like mothers do when you screw with their babies, am I right? So Kirk proposes a deal. The hoarder and soon the little hoarder kids are great at tunneling and all that, so what if they do the tunneling and you guys collect the progeum, adamantium, wonderflonium, all the stuff they mine for you? Spock says that could work, but the hoarder only has half an ass and it might die. McCoy shows up, hands still covered in mud, and says he's fixed the hoarder's ass. Used some thermal concrete, the kind they make emergency shelters out of, apparently. Poured some on the wound, and it'll act like a bandage while it heals. Kirk tells Spock to make the proposition about the whole mining thing to the hoarder. In the epilogue, Vandenberg calls up the Enterprise to tell them that the eggs have started hatching, and they're already swimming in progeum. He says they're ugly, but they're all right. Spock says the hoarder said the same thing about the humans, but that she likes Spock the most because Spock rules and stupid humans drool. So there. All's well that ends well, and we roll credits. Great stuff. This is a classic episode. The kind that even non-Star Trek fans would recognize, at least to an extent. A lot of great stuff in here, so let's start with a couple of lines.
You can't be serious. The thing is virtually made out of stone.
Help it. Treat it. I'm a doctor, not a bricklayer.
You knew this was going to be the first up. So this is technically the first time McCoy says what would become his catchphrase, I'm a doctor, not a whatever. In Corbomite, he says, what am I, a doctor or a moon shuttle conductor, which is very similar, I will grant you, but doesn't fit the pattern, so it don't really count. But I will say that this instance don't really read like a catchphrase, because he's kind of right, you know? His expertise is entirely in carbon-based life forms, and humans at that. Most doctors of humans would tell you that they'd feel a little dodgy administering first aid on a bird, just from all the differences between bird physiology and human physiology. What might heal a human could kill a bird. You just don't know. But this guy is being expected to render medical aid to a type of life he didn't even think was possible a half hour ago. How do you heal a rock? Of course, we're talking about McCoy here, so his healing instincts kicked in and gave him the idea about the cement, which, of course, worked like a charm. So it all worked out in the end. But the line is still way more motivated in this instance than it will be in the rest of them. Still a great line.
I suspect you're becoming more and more human all the time.
Captain, I see no reason to stand here and be insulted.
These guys know I love the trope of Spock taking any mention of him being like a human as an insult, and this is a good one. It really is kind of shocking at just how unabashedly racist McCoy is towards Spock. Always talking about how he's inhuman, talking about his pointed ears or his green blood, just laying into the guy just for being an alien. In an otherwise inclusive society, it kind of sticks out, but it's nice to see Spock push back on that stuff.
Without the pump mechanism, the reactor will go supercritical. It could poison half the planet.
A possum buddy of mine, well, let's say he spent a lot of time on nuclear vessels back in the day. And something that was always a pet peeve of his is when someone says that a reactor is going, quote, critical, as a way of saying it's going to blow up or melt down or whatever. But that ain't what critical means when it comes to reactors. Just the opposite, in fact. Critical is a good thing. That means the reactor is operating like it's supposed to, basically. What's bad is when it goes supercritical. That's when you need to beat feet. It's nice to hear Star Trek using the term correctly here. Now, there's a couple of things in here you're probably expecting me to put in a goof, but I'm going to surprise you and put them here instead. One of them is this.
Pain! 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 Murder! The thousands!
Devils.
Eternity ends.
Chamber of the Ages.
The altar of tomorrow.
Now, I've seen people make fun of this monologue, really is what it is, but I actually love this. I think it's beautifully delivered by Nimoy, and the imagery of things like the Chamber of the Ages and the Altar of Tomorrow are really neat. I love that the Hoarder is the only one to use the word devil, giving us the clue that the devil in the dark of the episode title is the humans, not the Hoarder. Now, we'll get into the message of the episode later on, but I have to give credit to Nimoy on making not only the physical pain, but the emotional pain and sorrow and feeling of hopelessness in the Hoarder really come to life in this scene. Well done. The other thing that might surprise you is the Hoarder itself. I love that thing. I mean, yeah, you can sense the guy under there, but that was always going to be the case. It's a 60s sci-fi series produced on a shoestring budget with limited technology. And maybe it's having a background in theater and seeing it more from the perspective of the performance of the creature, but I really dig this thing. It was designed and performed by a Hungarian guy named János Prohaska. János had an arrangement with the Star Trek production staff that if he ever came up with a creature costume that they liked, not only would they rent it from him, but he got to perform the creature in whatever they were going to use it for. Not a bad deal, actually. He's already shown up, in fact, in The Cage. Now, we don't see him in the menagerie, But in the cage, when they take Pike to his pen, they go by a couple of other creatures. One of them a big bird thing, which we also saw in Trelane's house in Squire of Gothos, and another one was an ape-like creature. Janos performed both of those, though I should point out that those were Wa-Chang creations, not Janos's. And we'll see Janos a couple more times in later episodes, too. He's kind of a cross between Andy Serkis and Doug Jones, really able to lend an otherworldly aspect to aliens. Gene Coon remembers Janos coming into his office in the costume, but Dorothy Fontana and Bob Justman both remember it being outside. Janos apparently asked Coon, Roddenberry, Justman, and Fontana to come outside the offices and check it out. Justman says, suddenly the blob skidded around the corner, making straight for us, then it stopped, curiously, backed away, and rotated in place. They all loved the thing. And after seeing it, Gene Coon wrote the script for the episode in 4 days. But speaking of the script, the Goof. Yeah, I love this episode. Do not get me wrong. It has a great message, which again we'll get to, but let's be honest here, there's some serious problems and holes in this thing. You guys know I am not a fan of when a story progresses because the characters act really stupid. And there's a lot of that in this script. 50 people have been cooked by the Hoarder. 50. And Vandenberg is still putting schmucks down by themselves in the dark to guard what exactly? I know we see that one guy get fried guarding the reactor, but that poor Schmitter bastard wasn't guarding nothing. He just walked around in the dark for 20 seconds and then died. Heck, even Schmitter saw that coming. Go back and watch. He knew he was toast from the beginning. And speaking of the reactor, if the Hoarder hates the humans and wants them all gone, why does it take the circulating pump rather than just destroying it? If the Hoarder somehow knows that will cause a reactor meltdown and doesn't want her and the kids wiped out too, well then what was the plan? Was she going to give it back all along? It don't seem like it, so why steal it rather than destroy it? And forget why she steals it, how does she steal it? I don't see no arms or grabby bits on Mrs. H over here. Did she just balance it on her head or something? And what does a Hoarder know about a friggin' reactor in the first place that she knows exactly what to steal? I know she's smart and all, but heck, I bet even McCoy wouldn't know enough about the thing to yoink the right part. And speaking of the reactor, this is a mining colony that apparently is extremely important to the Federation. They've been down for just a couple of months and already systems all over the Federation are feeling the reduced supply of Pagium. Life support systems are failing and whatnot. That's what they say. So why is this crucial place running on a reactor with no backup parts or any way to repair it and is so antiquated that Scotty thinks it's hilarious that Kirk would think he's got any parts for the friggin' thing? He literally laughs at the idea. And just what the hell are Vandenberg and his boys gonna do with friggin' clubs? The thing don't stop when it gets shot with a hand phaser, and it's made very quick work of over 50 guys. But something changes at the end, and suddenly these idiots are ready to go toe-to-toe with this thing with sticks. The hell sense does that make? And it ain't just the miners acting stupid. They blow a piece off of the Hoarder's ass, and Kirk just picks it up and holds it close to his face. Don't even let Spock scan it to make sure it's safe or nothing. This thing melts rock and dudes like a microwave melts cotton candy, but yeah, just pick it up. Hell, why not lick it? I bet it tastes like cumin. You dingleberry. And you don't see this kind of thing that often on this show, but check this out.
Seem to have had a cave-in.
Can you spot the problem here? What is this? I don't remember seeing these in any cave I've ever heard of. This is what you call a light control flag, or just flag for short. This one looks more scrim than solid because you can still see the light beam through the thing. It's just there to shield the bright lighting instrument from the camera so as you don't have a lens flare or have it screw up the exposure or anything like that. I didn't catch this until my third time watching this episode, but now I can't see nothing but the friggin' thing. And while we're playing Spot the Problem, tell me what's wrong with this scene.
You take the left, I'll take the right.
Should we separate?
Did you catch it? One more time.
You take the left, I'll take the right. You take the left, I'll take the right. You take the left, I'll take the right.
I got nothing. Ruminations. So Bill Shatner ain't having the best first season. You remember when he was going through a traumatic divorce back during the production of Shore Leave? Well, while they were shooting this episode, he got a call from his mom that his pops passed away. Really hit the guy hard, as you might expect. The higher-ups told him to take off and be with his family, but he wanted to push through and film as much as they could while everybody was there. So they changed some stuff up, like the coffee meeting in Vandenberg's office. That was supposed to be on the Enterprise, but they moved it there since they were already set up on that stage and didn't want to waste time moving stuff to the Enterprise set. And then they shot all the Kirk shots for the scene with Spock and the Horta, leaving the reverse shots for after Shatner left, using his body double Eddie Paskey. Because of Shatner's diligence and some masterful rearranging of the shooting schedule, the shoot only lost a single day. Shatner talked about how he was really struggling to keep it together during the shoot, and that Leonard Nimoy really stepped up and helped him out just by being close and being ready to be an ear or a shoulder or just a friend, whatever Shatner needed. Cinematographer Jerry Finneman also provided a good deal of comfort for him as well. Both Nimoy and Finneman had lost their fathers. Finneman's fairly recently, so they knew exactly what Shatner was going through. Shatner said he'll never forget what they did for him that day, and it cements my opinion that Leonard Nimoy is one of the best humans that has ever existed. If I could be half as good a person as that guy, I'd be doing pretty good. So despite all of the faults of this episode, it still stands as one of the all-time classic original series episodes and easily in the top 10% of all Star Trek episodes of all series. And the reason for that is the message. I don't know that you can get a message more Star Trek than this one here. The unknown can be scary, terrifying even, but sometimes when you learn more about the supposed enemy, the monster, when you find out about their motives, about who they are, and see things from their perspective, they cease to be a monster and start to be just another person, like you or me. That the monster is all down to perspective. To the miners, the Horta was the monster because she was killing them. But to the Horta, the miners were the monsters because they were callously and casually destroying her eggs, the literal future of her entire race. The miners didn't know that that was what they was doing, and the Horta didn't know that they didn't know. But when the Horta finds out that they didn't know those were her eggs, and the miners find out what they had been doing to this poor lady, in short, both sides drop what they feel like is their righteous anger and their need for revenge, and they listen to one another. They end up working together and cranking out Pageum like crazy. Now in this case, they had a mind-melding Spock to help facilitate things, but this is a silicon rock creature with half an ass. It's much easier when it's two humans or something like that. But let's not kid ourselves. You can find out all about your enemy and discover they're actually worse than you thought. But I think the point is, at least you tried, right? So there you have it. Devil in the Dark. What did you think of this episode? Do you agree that the power of the message more than makes up for the shortcomings in the writing and the production value? What about Spock's mind meld? Do you dig it too? Or did you find it a little goofy? No judgment here, all opinions are welcome. If you dug my little foray into the Pageum minds of Janus 6, reach down there and hit that like button if you would. Really helps out the channel. If you really liked it and you ain't subscribed to it yet, how's about sliding that mouse pointer over and smacking that subscribe button as well, and joining the Possum Friends, now over 2,000 strong. If you'd like to help us out monetarily, we got lots of great Possum merch over at adstudiosmerch.com, including our brand new Possum Friends Are Awesome Friends t-shirt, which are selling like hotcakes. You guys were really waiting on that one, I guess. Fantastic. Can't thank yous enough. Next time, war breaks out between the Federation and the Klingons, and the planet of Organia finds itself in the middle of the conflict. But there's something about these Organians that don't add up. Find out what that could be when we go along with Kirk and Spock on an errand of mercy. Until then, Possum Friends are awesome friends. Take it easy, all right? Later.